I mentioned in the intro that I teach a corporate self-care workshop, self-care in stressful times. And really, it's intended to help people pull some levers and figure out some of the underpinnings of what it means to take care of ourselves. Because I have a love-hate relationship with the word self-care or words. In my head, I picture it as a hashtag. So it's one word, but obviously it's two words. You know what it is. And that's because so often in our current culture, we talk about self care as products and services. That if I take a day at the spa, I'm doing a self care. Or if I buy this particular mask or new clothes, I'm doing a self care. And I really struggle with that framing because it's elitist, right? I only have good self care if I can afford good self care, which is kind of BS. It is remarkably limited because it's just actions and behaviors. And it's privileged, right? Because some of those services, some of those accesses, infrastructure to access around good healthcare, around good relaxation practices just aren't available in some places, some populations. It's also really individualistic, right? Like I'm going to do a self-care to myself. And my definition as a practitioner of self-care is very different than products and services. I define self-care as the actions that meet our human level needs. They are both ongoing. So they're ongoing in that they are like proactive systems to keep our needs met. And they can be reactive. So we might recognize that a need is not being met and take some kind of proactive, reactive response to correct the scales. And ultimately, I think good self-care is not about the narcissism of like, I deserve it. And I'm not saying that like we don't have an inherent worth to have our needs met, but I do think that robust and successful self-care serves something greater than just an individual's narcissism and self-prioritization. So whether we call that purpose, whether we call that meaning or service or family, good self-care isn't just about the self. It's about who we are and what we're here for. And that's the foundation I want to pour for this, solo-sode on self-care, is that that's what we're talking about. We are talking about you as a conscious being taking responsibility to take care of yourself as an organism, right? So like you have autonomy, you have self-awareness, you have a consciousness. And self-care is the moment that you go, you know what? I'm going to take real good care of this human being that is me. And what does it mean if we do that? Well, I invite you for a moment to have the thought experiment of what it means to take care of anyone or anything other than yourself. I have two cats, Bruce and Midnight. I take care of them by making sure that they have food and water and veterinary care when they need it, and they have a place to go poo. And we play games and we cuddle, and they're bored or they're sad or they're hurt. And I make sure that that gets corrected. I make sure that the humans that are around them are kind to them. And so I protect them. I make sure they're safe. I make sure that if there's a thunderstorm, that I'm in the house so that they don't just totally freak out, right? Like these are all the things that care for the needs of my fur babies. And so if I'm responsible for taking care of myself, if you are responsible for taking care of yourself, you are responsible for meeting your human level needs. What does that look like? Well, if we turn to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, Abraham Maslow. A fun fact about Abraham Maslow, if you're a nerd like me, Maslow never drew a pyramid. It was drawn as a marketing tool to use his work I don't know, to sell some stuff maybe. But that means that we can conceptualize it however we want because Maslow didn't draw a model. And the way that I like to think of Maslow's hierarchy, and if you're a nerd about this stuff, you want to read Scott Barry Kaufman's book Transcend. And I got talking to Scott is a year and a half ago. And I shared with him this model and he's like, oh my God, I drew the same model. So good to know that people smarter than me are drawing a similar idea here, that it's a nested set of circles. And at the foundation of that pyramid that we're used to seeing, Maslow's hierarchy, and for me as the core, is our physical needs. So our physical needs for sleep, good nutrition, enough water, hugs, walks outside, clean air, clean water. Oh my goodness. What are our actual tangible physical needs? And very often when I'm working with someone on their wellness and their self-care, what I find is that these core physical needs are not necessarily being met. And then if we start looking at Maslow's hierarchy, at these ideas of the needs, if our core needs are at the center, what we're able to contribute out to the world radiates out from the center. So each of these layers of needs allows us to contribute and to have meaningful contributions to the world. So if our core physical needs are in the middle, then we have the needs for safety. And I don't just mean like physical safety, my home is safe. I mean psychological safety, social, emotional safety, the safety that means that you can show up in the world and not have to worry about being persecuted, prosecuted, ostracized, abused. So it's, and it's also the safety that I don't have to worry about the people I love, which then leads us into this next layer of the need for love and belonging, to have people that we love who also love us back, who we can support that support us, that we have shared identities, that we have overlapping areas of interest. So this is not just lovers and family, this is friends, this is culture, this is identity. And so often now we are hearing about an epidemic of loneliness in our society. And the way that then lends itself to radical thinking, radicalization of ideas and ideals, because all of a sudden this lonely person has an opportunity to have an identity where they feel seen and heard and valued and validated, and the creation of tribalism and otherness. So the more that we focus on what's different between us, the less we feel senses of belonging and mattering and connection. And we have a need as people, because we are a social species, to feel connected. And that's why also the idea of like products and services, a self-care, really rubs me the wrong way, because sometimes self-care is just like hugging my grandmother or calling my man person, right? Like the way to take care of myself is to care for my clients, right? The engagement of meaningful work. And often these identities, these ideas, they build up our sense of ourselves. They become who we think we are or aren't. And they are the pillars with which we build our esteem on. And when all of these things are coming together, we are able to actualize, we are able to show up in the world doing what we are capable of and what we desire to do, and having meaningful contributions in the world. And these broad strokes are our human needs. And self-care is the strategies, the systems, and the reactions to a disequilibrium that bring us back into equilibrium. And very often, when we're taught that it's going for a walk, right? That's a specific like thing that I hear people recommend, like, oh, when you're having a bad day, just go for a walk. Very prescriptive. Or it's take a bath, it's have a glass of wine. These singular actions that are prescriptive if a person is having their bad day and they make themselves do them and they don't work, right? They buy that social media influencer recommended product. Woo. She says on a show that also involves plugs for products. I recognize my hypocrisy in the world. But if we do that and we don't feel better, right? What if we try all of the media influencer recommended products and we still don't feel equilibrium? Because what we actually needed was to like call your sister and eat something and drink water and take a nap. What it can lead to is disengagement, a feeling that there's something wrong with us and that we need the next product, the next service, the next wellness influencer pushed thing, as opposed to stepping back and seeing our humanness and what self-care looks like when you are a person. And what I think it looks like as a practitioner is by starting with the things that we already know we're good at and leaning into them, right? Taking that proactive, positive approach of, you know what? I'm a good cook and I like cooking and I've been eating out a lot lately. Maybe what I really need is just a week of being home and cooking for myself so that I'm eating better and I feel physically better. And oh, you know what else? I know that when I shut off screens at 8 o'clock, I sleep way better. I haven't been sleeping very good. So by starting with what you already know and being proactive, creating some rules of thumb for yourself, you can start from a place of positivity and proactive, and to keep beating this P here, power, right? The power in, instead of looking at the deficit, oh, I need a new fad diet because I need the structure of some new fad diet. Let me like cajole myself into this. Starting from a place of, I already know I need 9 hours in bed so I get 8 total hours of sleep and then I'll feel a lot better. Geez, starting there. And so I see those as proactive systems that start from what we know and where we are. And then the next thing I add to the toolbox with my clients is the reactive. Is what do you do? What is your toolkit when you are in a bad place in your head and your heart? Do you have go-tos that you can use? And we'll make a list, because here's the other thing is that when you are in the bad place, when you are dysregulated and feeling bad, or you're a little depressed, or maybe you're a lot of depressed, I don't know. When you're in the bad place, you literally think differently. Your brain works differently. We know from fMRI scans, we can see that positive emotion, or should say pleasant emotion, and unpleasant, challenging experiences function differently in the brain. And in that other space where you're reacting to something hard, challenging, negative, you don't always think of the stuff you know. You don't always think of the tools that you have. So being able to just look at a Post-it on your desk that says, if you feel crappy, do these 5 things. That's your reactive self-cares. One of my favorite professors, James Kowalski, teaches at the University of Pennsylvania. And he talks about working on his doctorate, and that he noticed he wasn't always having like the best well-being. And he realized, like, every time he feels kind of crappy, to ask myself, have I eaten? Have I had any water? Have I worked out? Or am I tired? And it, of course, harkens to 12-step programs: HALT, hungry, angry, lonely, tired. One of my friends added another H on it, which was horny. Are you hungry, angry, lonely, tired, or horny? Well, then it's not like a deeper dive into your psyche and pull some tarot cards. There's some big metaphysic, whatever like, no, you didn't drink any water, or you need a hug, like these foundational physical, tangible needs being met. And being able to run yourself down the checklist of, when I move, when I dance, when I laugh, when I watch some stand-up comedy, when I call that one friend who always gets me out of my bullshit, having the list to go down before you go, okay, There's something else going on here. That is a form of reactive self-care. So these are specific actions that you can do in response to stressors to create equilibrium. Now, some of them are stress busters, like, oh, I come home from a bad day and I have a glass of wine, or I sit down in front of Netflix and binge for a little while. It's just a way to like unplug. Okay. At some point, those actions do not bring us back into a positive equilibrium. There is a threshold at which they become numbing behaviors. And I do see it as, you know, the light switch of between, or the line, line is probably a better metaphor here, between what brings us back into equilibrium, what calms us down, unplugs us, lets us recharge. And it's numbing when it doesn't create equilibrium. So if we take the wine example, I get home at the end of the day, I tell myself I'm going to have a few ounces of wine and I end up drinking half the bottle. And then you don't get any deep sleep. You wake up feeling like a bag of hammers did a dance in your skull. And that next day sucks because you're tired and you're hungover and you're grumpy. That is not equilibrium. That didn't unplug you. It like fried the circuit board. And it's going to take, depending on your age, going to take you a few days to get back to a place of function. So when you look at your reactive practices, are they actually serving you? Or are they chipping away at you? So there's a lot that could go in here, right? Like there's a lot that we could take this to do. And that's why it's like a full 1 hour workshop and it's a lunch and learn and it's blah, 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 blah. But I want to leave you with a button that I use in the workshop. And that's to imagine your energy as a bucket. And that every positive thing that you're doing, and this metaphor is not mine. I know I picked it up along my fitness life, but I have heard it used so many places as to become a bit ubiquitous in the fitness and wellness world. If you know whose it was originally, do feel free to send me a DM. But your energy is a bucket, and when stressors come along, they put a hole in the bottom of the bucket. Big, bad stressors, things that wear us out, put big, ugly holes in the bucket. But the little stressors, the little things that challenge us, that niggle at us, you're frustrated, those are littler holes, right? And big holes are going to drain the bucket faster. The more holes you have, the faster the bucket drains. And very often, our self-care practices on our good days, right? There's just energy going in, energy going out. It's this nice flow. But on our hard days, the bucket is draining faster and faster. And very often, those are the days that we don't eat well, we don't get enough sleep, we argue with those we love out of being reactive. And then we have less and less going in while the bucket is also draining faster and faster. So what I want to propose to you is when you conceive of your own energy bucket and your own practices, on the bad days, are you filling it up faster to manage your stress? Or are you letting the things that shore you up fall to the wayside, which then can drain the bucket? And I believe that burnout happens when that bucket hits bottom, because you cannot pull water from an empty well, or in this case, an empty bucket. And then we're not able to contribute the things that we want to the world. We can't actualize. If you don't sleep long enough, you go insane. I mean, if you keep not sleeping, you will actually perish. But if you are not in your right mind, how can you care for others, love others, have robust self-esteem, feel good about yourself, show up, contribute creatively, and do all the cool shit that you were put here to do? So to me, then self-care becomes this act of upward spiral priming so that we can contribute in the ways that we are meant to in the world. To quickly summarize, start with what you already know. Recognize what you are nailing on the self-care front, right? Do you always drink enough water? Are you eat and lead protein like a champ? Are you the queen of vegetables? Are you the king of, um, I'm not going to drink when I'm in a bad mood because it's depressant? Start with what you're nailing. Then look to like, what can I nudge a little bit better, so that you're gradually putting positive systems into place. And then look to, how do I react when I'm sad, mad, bad? And does it actually bring me back into equilibrium? So that my self-care is about taking high-level care of me, the organism, the entity in the world, and not about like whatever one of the Jenners has Instagrammed this week. Clearly, I have strong positive feelings about wellness influencers. All right. If you've got questions, if you've got thoughts, if you've got ideas about self-care, shoot me a DM. Find me on Instagram. I'm at Darlene.coach, and I would love to hear from you.